All that glitters is not gold. In fact, in D&D, it's usually magic items. On this episode, I want to show you a system I've been using to create unique magic items that level up with your characters, and how to do this quickly at the table using stickers. One of these stickers will surely give you advantage on your Save versus Justin. In my D&D games, nothing captures a player's attention like the chance to get a new magic item. For many players, it's the ultimate reward that can either enhance the strengths of their character or provide new options for what that character can do. They can switch up how you might play your character or even introduce new plots or adventures. Usually that mix of new abilities or powers is kind of random depending on the magic items that are found during an adventure. And I actually think that's kind of great. It might give players ideas about their characters that they hadn't considered before, and it also gives characters a chance to come together as a group and decide how best to take advantage of those items, maybe come up with some new combos or strategies. But at the same time, I think there's an opportunity for magic items to help spotlight a character, or become part of that character's legend. To do that in D&D, I think that item needs to grow with the character, leveling up along with them and unlocking new abilities. And it looks like Wizards of the Coast might be thinking of something similar. You might have seen that Wizards has released their roadmap for 2026. That includes this concept of seasons, which are like themes related to upcoming products that they'll publish. One of the seasons later this year is called the Season of Magic, and it will align with a new source book coming out called Arcana Unleashed. I've seen a few different articles discuss the content they expect to see in this book, I guess based on what's being tested as part of the Unearthed Arcana playtesting program. And one of those things is something called an evolving magic item system that's supposed to support magic items that level up with characters. I'm not sure how Wizards plans on doing this exactly. I haven't seen a lot of details yet, but I think for a system like this, it would be interesting if the players could have some say in what those new powers are that these magic items gain or unlock. If our players can help define these unique magic items, they'll become invested in them, right? They'll get excited about how it might become part of their character, and maybe how it might add new themes or chapters to the story we all come to the table to tell together. But creating unique items that grow with characters in a way that's hopefully also a bit balanced can take a lot of time and work. I wanted to introduce items like this to my games, but I didn't want it to overshadow our adventure or cut too much into my prep time. So I created a system for crafting what I'm calling rune items, which I know is a term that's been used a lot in several different games, but it also helps get that concept across quickly. In my games, the ability to craft rune items is usually triggered by some kind of story event or reward related to a quest. For example, in my Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign, the characters met a runesmith that was traveling with the carnival, and they got access to crafting rune items through him once they joined the carnival themselves. Once they have access to a runesmith, they can pay to have runes inscribed or forged onto an item. They get to choose an item from their inventory, and when that first rune is added, that item becomes a magic item. So if that item was a weapon, it would be a magic weapon that deals magic damage. To represent this, we add a sticker to that item card. Or you could add it directly to the character sheet, and it has the details for that rune's power. These magic items also require attunement by the character, and in 5th edition D&D, you're limited to attuning to 3 magic items at a time. The runes themselves are meant to chronicle and reflect that character's legend as it grows. Mechanically, what that means is that only 1 rune can be added to an item per character level. Each rune added to an item is more powerful than the last one, right? So they have to be added in order from weakest to strongest. I've provided a link to the list of runes that I use in the description below. This list is made to be printed on Avery 5267 address labels, so they can be quickly peeled and stuck to a player's character sheet or item card as they're crafted. To dress them up a bit, I also let my players pick a rune sticker to add next to the description sticker. I found these on Amazon, and I'll provide a link to them as well. In general, unless a rune provides a continuous ongoing effect, each rune can only be used or triggered once per long rest. And to trigger a rune, a character needs to use a bonus action. In my games, I have 5 levels of runes, starting with the Myth rune. That's this first column here. Myth runes provide some kind of minor one-time ability or boost, typically equal in power to something like a cantrip or charm. The second rune is called the Lore rune, and it steps up in power to the equivalent of a first level spell. In fact, you can see some of these stickers don't have details. They just say Enspelled Rune, and leave space for the player to write a first level spell that's triggered by the rune. It's important to note that for Enspelled Runes, triggering that rune allows the character to cast that spell from the item using a bonus action instead of whatever the normal casting time is. That makes them a bit more powerful than they might initially seem. The third rune is called a Chronicle rune, and it's a little bit different. First of all, when that rune is added to an item, that item is now considered a +1 item. The effects for that are pretty obvious for something like a weapon or armor. But if it's not clear how that item could benefit from a +1, that's up for DM interpretation with input from the player. For example, a character in one of my games has Rune inscribed boots. I could have maybe defaulted to a +1 armor class, but instead I added +1 square of movement or +5 feet. In addition, a Chronicle rune also has some other ongoing permanent bonus or effect associated with it. For example, advantage on a certain skill or a resistance to a certain type of damage. The fourth rune is called a legend rune. And here the player has a choice of either gaining a one-time use of a powerful effect in the form of a third-level spell, or an additional ongoing effect. And finally, the fifth rune is called a saga rune, and those can get a bit crazy. They start by adding an additional +1 to that item's bonus. So for example, a sword that was a rune item would get a +1 with its Chronicle rune, but when a saga rune was added, it would then be considered a +2 weapon, +1 for each rune. But you can see that the rest of the sticker is blank. That's because I wanted to provide the opportunity for the player and DM to work together to come up with something unique, and I didn't want it related to any kind of formula. It's up to the player to imagine something cool that might embody the character's relationship to that item, and then it's up to the DM to balance it and make sure it doesn't break their game. You can kind of think of items with saga runes as minor artifacts. Maybe it's something like a sentient weapon that has its own thoughts and knowledge, or maybe it bends time and lets the character undo the last 6 seconds once per day. And maybe it's not all good. Maybe it opens a mental rift to the far realms to draw power from some entity that hungers for souls. I mean, I don't know. You do you, player. I guess the point is, if the character's looking for an effect that you think might be too powerful, add a cost or limit to it that makes using it an interesting choice or trade-off. Whatever it is, it should be unique and memorable and tied to that character's story. Crafting and adding a rune to an item costs gold, and the cost scales up with the power of each rune. The costs listed here are based on the economy of my games, which is pretty consistent with published 5e adventures until about 5th level, when I start dividing the gold found in those adventures by about 4. If you decide to try out rune items in your games, please note that these are experimental rules and will likely require some DM interpretation, but I have provided my notes and the sticker sheet in the description below. Do you have a system for leveling up magic items, or have you seen one that works well in another role-playing game system? Any thoughts or predictions on what will be included in Arcana Unleashed? Drop a comment and I'd love to continue the conversation.